teenagers, and the wife of Will Baker, who she loved deeply. At 42, she was a striking woman with dark hair and eyes, a slim figure, and a bright smile. She was also very smart and understood people well. However, at that moment, she found herself at a banquet table, worried about the state of her marriage and family. It was all her doing. Her husband, Will, and her client, Robert Dawson, were glaring at each other. Their disagreement was about her. Robert wanted to spend the weekend together while Will was with his friend, the young and attractive Gina. In reality, Melody had been excited for a break from her marriage. She found Robert very appealing, to the extent that she considered letting Will be with Gina. This situation began a few months earlier when Robert was involved in a lawsuit with a large bank. He sought help from her law firm, which assigned her to represent him. They began to work closely together, having lunches alone and sharing personal stories after hours. Melody was aware that she was straying from her marriage vows because of her feelings for Robert. He was single and had a reputation for being a charming man. He was taller and perhaps more polished than Will, who still had some rough edges from his upbringing. After several late meetings, Melody realized she was curious about exploring a relationship with Robert. The case demands increased, which brought Robert and Melody closer. He started to express his interest in her when they were alone. They shared soft kisses and hugs, but Melody held back from going further, despite her strong desire. She knew exactly what she wanted, but was unsure how to pursue it without ruining her life. One evening, during a late meeting, Robert suggested they take some time for themselves in his hotel suite. He was staying at a hotel since he didn't have a local residence. Melody turned down the offer immediately. Although tempted, she didn't want to betray Will. It was important to her to be honest and honorable. She also had a sense that Will could tell if something happened, even as soon as it did, and that would be the end of things between Mel and Will. Mel let Robert know this before they said goodbye that evening. That was when they shared their first real kiss, and Mel felt a mix of excitement and surprise. Things settled down a bit between them after that, but not for long. The negotiations for the settlement were progressing quickly. Mel had sent the other side some more specific requests, signaling that everything would be open and honest, no secrets. In the end, the case settled in Robert's favor. After the documents were signed and sent off, Robert took Mel out for an early dinner to celebrate. His idea of celebration included a bit more than she was comfortable with, and Mel simply said no, though it wasn't a very strong no. As they walked towards Mel's car outside the restaurant, Robert said, "I have an idea." Mel smiled and replied, "I know. You just shared it and I just said no." Robert continued, "I'm being honored at a charity dance next Friday here in town. I'd like to invite you and Will. I'll be bringing a lovely woman, someone I've been close with for a while." Mel frowned a bit. "What are you getting at, Robert?" "During the event, I might offer Will a chance to switch partners. He can dance with her and I can dance with you, just for the weekend." "Oh my," Mel replied, feeling a bit off balance. She was truly flustered. "Do you think he would agree?" Robert pressed on. "No, maybe." "I doubt it," Mel answered, unsure. Robert kissed her again and said, "I'll send you an invitation. You and Will can join me and my partner at the main table. There will be dancing. She's a professional dancer and will be a great partner for Will." Mel said, "We'd be happy to join you for dinner. But about the idea of switching partners, let's talk more before making any decisions. Maybe we can decide after seeing how the evening goes." "All right. But I promise it will be a fun time if we go for it." "I believe you." She got into her car and drove away, knowing Robert likely meant it. That evening, Mel told Will about the settlement and the dinner dance planned for that Friday. Will said, "Does this mean Robert will be leaving soon?" "Yes, after Friday. His work on the case is basically finished now." Will seemed relieved, except for the upcoming formal event. "You know, I never feel at ease at these kinds of things." "You'll be fine. Robert is bringing a professional dancer, and I know how much you enjoy dancing." Will perked up at that, but didn't say anything. He was a writer who created all kinds of stories, thrillers, mysteries, and even a science fiction book lately. He wasn't a celebrity, but he made a good living, better than Mel's law career. He worked mostly from home, allowing him to be present with their two kids, Sherry, who was 17, and Mark, who was 15. Will had been the stay-at-home parent since they were young, although he occasionally traveled for book promotions. And recently, Will had to go to Los Angeles to help with a movie based on his latest thriller, A Dangerous Man. Most of the time, he took the kids to school and wrote. He was a fast and confident writer who didn't do much rewriting. Will could write this way because he paid close attention to everything around him. If something caught his eye, he could describe it in detail and replay it in his mind like a video. Then he would jot it down. This quality worried Mel when she turned down Robert's casual invitation. Will never stopped observing everyone around him, including her and the kids. Often he noticed things about the kids that helped avoid issues. The kids thought of Will as somewhat magical. They knew they couldn't hide anything important from him. So did Mel. The banquet for Robert was an elegant event in a nice place downtown. The kids were spending the weekend with Mel's parents, which, she thought, left the weekend open for whatever plans the adults might have. Mel felt nervous when they arrived. She wanted to enjoy herself, but she was uncertain about the proposal that had been made. Her worries eased a bit when she saw Gina. Gina was stunning, and Mel noticed Will's stare as they were introduced by Robert. This made Mel feel a twinge of jealousy. She wondered if it was a mistake to let Will have any connection with Gina. However, this thought distracted her from considering whether Will would actually agree to the proposal. The four of them enjoyed dinner together, along with Robert's colleague Gloria and her husband Rick. Gloria had made it clear to Mel that she and Robert had a history together. The dinner went smoothly, and then Robert received an award and gave a speech that mixed humility with clever self-praise. He received applause and returned to the table. Will congratulated him, as did everyone else. Then the band started playing, and after a few songs where they danced with their partners, Robert took Mel onto the dance floor. Mel was drawn to Robert even more now. He moved with confidence, and as they danced, she could feel his energy. She was also aware of his interest in her. Mel didn't really notice that Will and Gina were still at the table. Her attention was focused on Robert. As they began their second dance, Robert leaned in and whispered, "Should I make the proposal after this song?" Mel replied, "Yes." "Go ahead." She was no longer worried about Gina. When they returned to the table, Mel realized that Will and Gina had not moved at all. Robert asked Will why they hadn't joined them, and Will simply said that he had been watching them dance. He looked straight at Mel. Mel was about to speak up and tell Robert to stop, but Robert said, "Will, Mel and I have been spending a lot of time together these past months. I hope we can have the weekend together. You and Gina could join us too." Mel turned to her husband, but he only had eyes for Robert. There was a long silence. Then Will said, "No." It was a clear refusal. No further explanation was given. His tone was serious. At that moment, Mel's hopes for a weekend alone with Robert vanished. She recognized that tone from Will. She thought about warning Robert not to push any further, but Robert quickly replied, "Maybe you should ask Mel." Will answered without hesitation, and his words were worrisome. "I'm not asking her, Robert. Our marriage is in a fragile place. One wrong move could break it. We have kids to think about." Robert turned to Mel. "Well, I'll ask her. Mel, would you consider it?" Mel looked at Will. He was firm and unyielding. She realized she was in deep trouble. She stood up, declined Robert's offer, and took Will's hand as they walked out together. The drive home was filled with silence. Mel felt scared and close to tears. She knew Will was aware of the situation she and Robert had talked about at the dance. Will had been careful not to let Mel openly state her feelings about the plan. But Mel understood that Will recognized her desire to go through with it, and she feared that realization could end their marriage. It had been a misguided attempt on her part. Once inside their house, the silence lingered. Will went upstairs to shower while Mel sat in the kitchen feeling overwhelmed. She looked around at the home where they had been so happy raising a family. After a while, Mel reflected on everything. She realized Will had intentionally made it hard for her to declare she wanted to swap. It seemed like his way to prevent their relationship from falling apart. Although they both knew she was interested, addressing it openly could change everything. She felt there were no good excuses for her feelings. The truth would be painful. She heard the shower stop and waited. Then she went upstairs. Will was getting dressed in sweats and sneakers. He glanced at her and said, "I'm going for a run. Not sure why I even showered." He jogged down the stairs and left. Will's strange behavior worried Mel. She sensed he wasn't as composed as he appeared at the dance. After her shower, she waited for him to return, which took about an hour. Dressed in her pajamas, she found it hard to sleep. She sat in a chair at the edge of the bed and tried to read a book on her tablet, but it was difficult to focus. Will's run helped him calm down. He had sidestepped a direct acknowledgement of Mel's feelings and her interest in Robert. If she had ever supported the suggested change, he would have left her at dinner and maybe walked away for good. It was something he just couldn't accept. Mel should have understood that after all these years. Honestly, he felt she did know, but she was moving forward anyway. His effort to keep her from disrespecting him openly had left everything in an unclear and uneasy state. He chose to leave it that way and see what would happen. He thought it might help to understand her actions, but deep down he didn't truly need that. She seemed so caught up with this guy that she had lost her focus. They might try counseling, but what good would that do? If she didn't bring up the topic, he would let her think it over. Meanwhile, he would start keeping an eye on her and her client. When he returned from his run, Mel was reading in the bedroom. Will came in the front door, turned off the lights downstairs, and went to the bedroom. He changed and showered, then came out clean and quiet. He put on comfortable clothes and got into bed without saying anything. Soon after, Mel turned off the light and joined him in bed. She was unsure if she should start a conversation. In the end, she decided against it and managed to sleep several hours later. Will woke up early that Saturday. He went to his mom's house to pick up the kids and treated them to breakfast at Denny's. His oldest, Sherry, asked, "Where's Mom?" Will replied curtly, "She didn't sleep well." Mark, his 15-year-old, asked, "How was the dinner dance?" Will said, "The music was all right, and the food, too." The kids noticed he was not in a good mood. They quickly changed the topic to schoolwork. The drive home was okay as Will cheered up a bit, but both teens were still attentive when they arrived. Mel woke up to find Will was gone. There was no note, so she assumed he had gone to get the kids. As she came downstairs just dressed, the three of them walked in the front door. She watched them closely, hoping that maybe Will had talked to them about the Robert issue. She could see they were a bit more reserved, but not upset. So nothing was said. An uneasy calm filled the house. Sherry and Mark headed out for the afternoon while Will worked in the yard. Mel pretended to read, and the two of them didn't talk. At dinner, the only exchange was, "Please pass the salt." When it was bedtime for the adults, Will went for another run. He came back, showered, and went to bed without saying much to Mel. She asked him, "Did you have a good run?" He replied, "Yes," and then turned over to sleep. On Sunday, Mel tried to cuddle with him in the morning, but Will got up right away. He dressed quickly and went downstairs. The kids went out and stayed out. As they left, Sherry asked Mark, "What do you think's going on?" "Not sure. Something from that dance," Mark replied. Sherry nodded and said, "Yeah, it must be Mom's doing." Mark asked, "Wasn't the dinner for one of Mom's important clients?" "Yes." "But no point in guessing. If it keeps happening, we can ask them." "Uh-huh, maybe not." Sherry thought this might mess things up completely. They went their separate ways. Mel made a tasty lasagna for Sunday dinner, along with a cucumber salad. Both kids had seconds. But Will didn't eat much. He just picked at his food and left a lot on his plate. That was very unusual for him. He simply wasn't hungry. When he wasn't hungry, he didn't eat. He watched a football game that night until late. Mel pretended to be asleep when he came upstairs. On Monday, after everyone else had left for school and work, Will called his friend Mason Dabney, a manager at the hotel where the dinner took place and where Robert Dawson was staying. They had been friends since high school and shared a beer now and then. After some small talk, Will asked Mason if Robert Dawson was still there. Mason said Robert was scheduled to leave the next day. Mel's drive to work was tense. Her anxiety grew because she had a final meeting with Robert and his assistant, Gloria. The meeting was to finish everything up. At 10 o'clock, Mel brought them into a conference room. They talked about the details of the agreement, and it wrapped up in about 20 minutes. Then Robert asked, "Mel, are you okay after the event?" Mel glanced at Gloria. Robert continued, "You were right there." Mel replied, "No, maybe I'm not okay. My feelings may cost me a lot." Robert frowned. "But nothing happened. He said no and you left." He knew I was interested. And since we left, he hasn't spoken to me much or come near me at all. Mel seemed calm, but it was clear she was not. Robert said, "He's foolish if he throws you away over that. Even if something had happened, he'd still be a fool. If he casts you aside, just call me. I don't want to be pushed away." She shook hands with both of them and exited the room. Gloria looked at Robert and said, "Just the two of us tonight, then." He nodded. "I asked Gina not to join us. Looks like Rick will be alone again tonight." Gloria smiled. "Yep, I'll make it up to him later. He gets so excited." They both made their way back to the hotel. Mel struggled to work that day and decided to go home early at 3 o'clock. When she arrived, Will was at his computer. She leaned in to see what he was doing, then stood in the doorway. He didn't look up after the initial glance. Once he finished what he was writing, he finally looked at her. She said, "I'm a mess. I couldn't work today." "Whose fault is that?" "Mostly mine, I admit. I was too scared to speak up. But I need to apologize and see how things stand. The kids are worried, and so am I." "Is your friend Robert still around?" "Yes, we had a short meeting this morning. I think he leaves tomorrow." "He's full of himself." Mel spoke softly. "I turned him down when he suggested sneaking around. He made me think that maybe you'd be interested in Gina. I should have known better." There was a long pause before Mel spoke again. "What can I do, Will?" Will responded, "I'm not sure. Nothing comes to mind right now." She said, "Everyone has their moments of weakness, Will." He nodded in agreement. Mel knelt in front of him. He was wearing his usual gym clothes, shorts and a t-shirt. There was a tense silence between them. She stood up, straightened her dress, and sat beside him on the couch. They shared a quiet, heavy moment. She rested her hand on his, and they sat together, trying to process everything. Dinner that night was reheated lasagna. Mel seemed to be in a much better mood, and the kids noticed it when they got home. Will was still in his office, working. At 6:30, Mel sent Mark to call his dad for dinner. Mark knocked on the door and said, "Dinner's ready." Will emerged from his office and came downstairs to join them. When Will entered the kitchen, Mel watched him closely, surprised that he hadn't come down sooner. The kids were watching too. Will gave everyone a warm smile and sat down at the table. He asked the kids about school, and he talked to Mel about a project they'd been discussing, cleaning out the garage. Dinner felt more normal than it had in days, a welcome change from the tension that had been hanging over the house. The evening ended with the kids heading to their rooms, and Mel and Will tidying up the kitchen together. Will turned to her and said, "Intimacy is important, but it's not everything. I get that the guy was attractive. You've had plenty of guys hit on you over the years, probably some even more attractive than him. Why him? Why now?" Mel paused, then said, "I worked with him for months. He was persistent, and over time it wore me down. By the end, I was struggling to resist. I'm surprised you didn't go through with it." She hesitated, then said, "I came close, Will. I was tempted, but I didn't." Will looked down for a moment before responding, "It's hard for me. It makes me feel like I wasn't enough." Mel smiled softly. "You're an amazing husband, a wonderful father. You are enough." "That could mean a few different things," Will replied. "No, you are the best," Mel reassured him. "It's just hard to feel like I was second choice when it comes to everything else," Will admitted. Mel gently placed her hand on his arm and said, "You are everything to me, Will. It's not like we're the most wanted people in the world. The truth is, you are the most wanted woman to me." She appeared pleased when he said that, but her mood changed when he added, "But I'm not that for you. I'm the one you can count on. That guy was just a passing interest." She didn't argue. "I guess I'll never find out about him. Maybe he wouldn't have been great. I'll only know about you." Will nodded and walked to the bedroom. Mel realized she had a lot to figure out. What Will said was true. She wanted Robert more than she wanted Will, at least back during the party and maybe for a few days after that, perhaps even at that very moment. Over the next several months, Mel worked hard to show Will that he was the only one for her, but in the end, it didn't turn out as she hoped. They were close at times, and there were moments they shared a good connection. Other times he seemed distant, which frustrated Mel. Their relationship hadn't returned to what it was before the party. Both Mel and Will recognized this. One evening, Will sat alone in the house, thinking about what had gone wrong. From one angle, Mel's actions hadn't been terrible. She'd admired a guy who was, in all honesty, very appealing. She hadn't actually been unfaithful, but she had desired him enough to consider risking her family. No matter how he looked at it, the fact that Mel wanted another guy more than him felt like a breaking point. What he had told her was real. There wasn't another woman who could make him feel like that, at least no one he had met. He had seen some attractive women around, like the friendly neighbor, but he had never thought about being unfaithful. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling of being second best in her eyes. That thought weighed on him more and more. He found himself wondering if she thought about Robert when they were together. He guessed that she probably did. Still, he pushed those feelings aside. He decided to stick with her for the sake of their kids, even though they were older. He needed to stay for a while. After all, he still had companionship and support from Mel. Sort of. Around 8 months after the banquet, Robert was coming back. He was involved in a legal issue regarding one of his chemical patents. Mel had studied chemistry in college, so this case matched her skills, and she had worked with the main people before. One morning, the 3 main partners called her in for a meeting, and there was Robert. Right away, she thought, just what I don't need. The 3 important people from her company were Abe, Bart, and Caleb. Abe knew her best and understood the issues she had faced with Robert and Will from the last case. After some awkward greetings, Abe said, "Mel, we know you might struggle with this, but Robert has an important case and he wants you to handle it. He trusts you. It's about a chemical patent. You have the skills he needs." Mel replied, "Abe, I really can't do this. You know why. I have a family and I want to keep it safe." Robert interjected, "Mel, what happened before won't happen again. Trust me." Mel shook her head. "Even if I believe that, Will would think differently." Bart added, "Mel, this is really important for the company and for Robert. There's a lot of money involved. You need to be strong. I'm sure Will understand." Mel looked at him. "No, it's too risky for me." Caleb said, "It's a big risk to turn this down. It could mean losing your job. Will just have to trust you. We're all adults, and Robert has promised to keep things professional." Mel responded, "Will and I don't need my salary. It's not essential, but I will talk to him about it." Robert said, "If he objects, I can discuss it with him. I promise I won't push it. I really need this help." That evening, Mel felt very anxious. She knew she had to wait until late to talk to Will. Will noticed something was off. When they were alone in the living room, he asked, "What's going on with you?" Mel replied, "Robert has a new case he wants me to take. It's a chemical patent." "And what did you say?" "I said no, but they kept insisting. If I refuse, I could lose my job." Will said, "You know having a degree in chemistry isn't everything. You'll have to work with experts, right? They'll guide you." "Yes, but Robert also knows a lot about chemistry. I think he wants me to lead the team because it saves time and money on training someone else. He wants you because of what happened before. He feels hurt and wants to fix it with you." "No, maybe. But he has a good reason to trust me on this project. He says he won't act unprofessionally again because he has a lot to lose." "And I don't believe him, Mel." "You don't trust me?" "Regardless, if he tries to make things uncomfortable, I won't let him." Will sat in silence for a moment, then shrugged. "How much will you need to work with him on this case?" "He and Gloria have rented a place near the office and will be around for at least 6 weeks." Will looked at her thoughtfully. "I trust your judgment. Maybe this is a chance for you to show me your true abilities. You know what's at stake." Mel nodded. "I understand." Will went upstairs to bed. Mel followed Will to bed a few minutes later. As they settled in, she gently touched his stomach and said, "I could use some love." They shared a quiet, intimate moment together, starting slow but growing into something comforting for both of them. Afterwards, they lay next to each other in silence. Mel whispered, "Thanks." Will smiled. "No need to thank me. That was nice." They both slept soundly that night. The next day, Mel accepted the lead role in Robert's case. Robert and his partner Gloria attended a series of long meetings. Mel had 2 associates helping her, though neither had any training in the field they were dealing with. The following day was equally intense, and by the end of it, they hired 2 experts to help with the case. The meetings ran late, so dinner was catered at the office both nights. Mel arrived home between 9:30 and 10, completely worn out. On the second night, while they were in bed, Will asked, "Is everything going okay?" "Yes, just a lot to do. Plus, Robert has Gloria with him. I think her husband is fine with it." Will replied, "She told me he's into it. She even tried to suggest something about you and Robert. I told her that wasn't happening. I don't get that kind of stuff." Mel shook her head. "Gloria says she has control over him. I wouldn't want a marriage like that, but don't worry, Will." Will chuckled. "That's not really what I'm worried about. Will, if I ever feel like there's a problem, I'll let you know. We'll talk about it. But I don't think it's going to happen." "Okay." After the first couple of days, the work pressure eased. Mel got her team focused on their tasks, mainly legal research. She and Robert continued to consult with their experts. 2 weeks into the project, Mel felt confident that Robert wouldn't be an issue. She told Will that, but he still wasn't fully convinced. He watched her carefully each evening when she came home. Still, their relationship improved, and there was a new level of closeness between them. Mel's focus on their marriage seemed to encourage Will, even though his concerns lingered. Despite this, Will couldn't shake the feeling that something might happen. Mel was spending a lot of time with Robert, and although he didn't believe there was anything inappropriate going on, he feared it could develop. He suspected that being in close contact with Robert could stir feelings again, just like last time. He hoped it wouldn't come to that. About a month into the case, Robert had been away for a few days for business in Pittsburgh and had just returned that day. Mel came home, full of energy. The kids were out for dinner with friends, and as soon as she saw Will, she pulled him into the bedroom. They shared a passionate moment, a reflection of the bond they still had, though their worries and work stress remained in the background, warm and thick. It went on for a while because Will wanted to take his time. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. He released a lot of feelings. The 2 of them, worn out, lay there trying to catch their breath. Will looked at Mel and said, "I guess I can thank Robert for that." Mel sighed. "Yes. What are you going to do? What have you decided?" "I haven't done much. He hasn't really made a strong move on me." "Can you explain?" "I mean, he hasn't really pushed it. But there have been little touches and some sneaky comments." Will said, "The hugs and smiles." "No, ugh! I guess I should be grateful you brought it home with you." Yes. For how long?" "Honestly, it feels risky. I need to finish this part of the case, getting ready with the experts. I'm not really sure what's happening with all this. Other guys who like you seem more appealing." "Not for me, Will. It's just you and him." She paused. "I mean, you and him together." Will turned over, trying to get some sleep. It wasn't easy. Mel fell asleep right away. The next morning, Will stopped Mel as she was leaving for work. He said, "If you give in, if he tries and succeeds, you'll be in trouble. It won't matter how wealthy he is. Just tell him." Mel was taken aback. Will looked at her earnestly. She was speechless. He gave her a gentle pat on the cheek. "So you both understand the seriousness of it. I'll face the consequences if I have to." Then he went back inside. He sat down for breakfast and finished his eggs. After sending the kids off to school, he took some time to research. He had a plan forming. He hoped he wouldn't need it. Mel drove to work feeling a bit shaken. She tried to make sense of Will's warning. She wanted to believe he didn't mean it or wouldn't act on it. But she had seen and heard his determination. She needed to get through the next 2 weeks with Robert before handing the case to other lawyers, and she had to do it without any trouble. When she reached the office, she had some coffee and reviewed the latest reports from the experts. Robert and Gloria arrived around 10, bringing along Jonathan Crisp, an expert chemist who had his laptop with him. The 4 of them met in a big conference room assigned for their case. After about an hour discussion, they took a short break. Mel headed to her office, but Robert followed her and closed the door behind him. He asked, "What's bothering you?" She replied, "Will is really upset about this. I've tried to downplay it, told him you weren't really pursuing me." "Well, that's mostly true. Not completely, Robert. You're circling around the point. But I know what you want." Robert smiled and said, "You and I have a connection." She laughed lightly, but it didn't feel lighthearted. "I know what you mean. Yesterday, poor Will was so confused when I got home. He should be thankful." "Better understanding through chemistry," he said with a smile. Mel replied, "He won't hurt me, Robert. Just you. Is it worth that risk?" Robert thought for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe it is." Mel warned him, "I want you to know that Will has some serious feelings, anger that builds up slowly. He meant what he said, and he could follow through." Just then, Gloria knocked, and they returned to the meeting. Will wasn't sure if his threat would work. He meant it in a roundabout way. He knew that if Robert got too close to Mel, it would lead to trouble, and maybe even a split. He remembered their talks about Robert and was confused by Mel's feelings for him. She had made it clear that she had never felt such a strong attraction to anyone else, not even her husband. Could she be blamed for that? She seemed surprised by how much she liked the guy. It was as if she thought she had met the one she was meant to be with, at least in a romantic sense. Will decided that if his warning didn't help, he likely wouldn't harm Robert, though he kept that idea open. But he also decided he was done being the second choice in his own marriage. If they got through their work without any more issues and Robert went back home, Will wasn't sure if he could stay in the relationship. If Mel went down that path, he wouldn't consider being with her again. That evening, when Mel came home on time, the family enjoyed a nice dinner that Will had prepared. Mel was glad to see that Will seemed calm. They watched a basketball game and then went to bed. Will asked Mel, "How was your day? Did you talk to Robert?" "I did. I told him about your feelings. After that, there were no issues." "Okay, it's up to you to help wrap this up. No matter what I say, he might keep trying. Once he goes home, we'll see." "What do you mean, we'll see? If he's not around, there's no problem." Will looked at her seriously. "I feel like an old meal, and he's the fancy dish." She laughed. "I'm not picky. I like your cooking, even if it is reheated." She then playfully tackled him. In that moment, Mel felt a thrill from their closeness, and she caught Will off guard. He tried to resist a little, but it felt good to be with her. Mel enjoyed their intimacy since the whole Robert situation came up. That night, she made an effort to connect with Will while secretly imagining being with Robert. They both understood the real feelings at play. Will felt hurt while Mel was worried about their future. They hadn't fully moved past the troubles caused by the idea of change in their lives. Maybe they never would. She had never deceived Will about how he ranked in her heart. That would have served no purpose. She simply comforted him when he seemed upset. The next few days at work for Mel were quite busy. They were preparing for the experts now that they had reports from the other side. Mel had to work all Saturday that weekend because Jonathan Crisp had preparations for a trial the following week in Stamen, Washington. He was flying to Spokane on Sunday and had a room in nearby Winesap by the Columbia River. The expert team finished their work the following Thursday morning. From that point until the trial in Pittsburgh, Mel and Robert could communicate by phone or video call if needed. During that week, Robert gently increased his efforts to win Mel over, despite her warning. But Mel was aware of what he was doing. That didn't mean she was unaffected. His charms stirred feelings in her, and she carried that energy home. Will was, of course, aware of Mel's growing feelings. So were the kids. One morning at breakfast, Sherry said, "You two are keeping us up late." Mel replied, "We'll get you some noise-canceling headphones." Mark added, "I've tried those, but they are a hassle." Mel responded, "Earplugs will help. It's not really our fault." They left it at that. Robert invited Mel out to lunch that Thursday. He was heading back to Pittsburgh the next morning. There would be a status hearing in the U.S. District Court the following week, but Mel didn't need to be there. Robert took Mel to a nice restaurant near his home. Gloria and the rest of the team were not present, which Mel expected. She knew Robert would make an effort to impress her. Normally, she would prioritize being careful, but she realized she had to be part of the trial in Pittsburgh. They had yet to set a trial date, but it would be decided at the hearing. The trial was focused on a patent issue and relied heavily on expert testimony. She would need to be in Pittsburgh for about 2 weeks, maybe even some weekends, so she had to choose whether to get involved or step back. She viewed the lunch as a test. The lunch was mostly enjoyable. Robert made it clear that he wanted to eat and then go to his place for something sweet. Mel politely declined. The food was tasty, and she had a glass of wine. Just one. Toward the end, Robert moved around the booth and put his arm around Mel. She didn't pull away. He gently touched her cheek, and Mel looked directly into his eyes. In that moment, she felt a strong desire, but realized she had to hold back. So this was new for her. She slid out of the booth, feeling anxious. She said, "I can't." Robert seemed disappointed. He said, "Not yet." Then he signaled for the check, and Mel went home. When she got home, she found Will. She said, "He's gone. I need you." She and Will spent the afternoon together in a cozy way until the kids came in just after 4. Mel felt relieved, like she had escaped a difficult situation. The next week, the judge in Pittsburgh set the trial for mid-June, 5 months away. Mel thought about all of it. She had a meeting with the 3 partners about the case. She started by saying that she wouldn't go to Pittsburgh for the trial. Abe asked, "Why? You managed everything well. Is it because of your husband? But nothing happened, right?" "That's true, but this was here where I went home every night. In Pittsburgh, I'd be far from everyone I know." Caleb said, "Why don't you just go? I mean, if you were in Pennsylvania, who would know?" "I would. And Will would probably find out too, even if not right away." Abe said, "We understand, but we really need you there." Mel smiled and said, "See if you can find someone else." She stood up and left the room. Once she was gone, Abe said, "She has us in a tough spot. At least we have some time. Maybe we can arrange for her to guide from here." Caleb said, "She's not strong. I don't like that. Let's look for someone else to hire." That's what they tried to do. In the following weeks, they interviewed 4 people. None were a good fit. They made an offer to someone from a large New York firm. He would have been able to take over. He turned it down. Mel had been training one of her assistants, Martin Blaine, so he might be able to help with the case. Meanwhile, Mel talked to Will about it. He had been expecting this. He knew there had to be a trial unless they reached an agreement. One evening, Mel said, "It looks like there will be a trial in Pittsburgh this year. They want me there." "And you said?" "No, they've been searching for someone to replace me. So far, no luck." "And time's running out?" "Yes. If I keep saying no, they'll probably let me go." "You'd have other options. Maybe we could write a book together, something exciting but with a twist about a marriage on the line." She started laughing and said, "Picture it. A story where the main character faces a difficult choice. You mean like that?" He chuckled and replied, "Maybe with new names. Do you think she'd give in?" "Of course she would. It's just a story, so we have to make it interesting." "And you? Would you give in with everything going on in Pittsburgh?" "It's not smoky anymore, but I won't lie, it could be tempting. A trial can be very stressful, and maybe that would help solve things." "But probably not, right?" "I feel overlooked." She said, "Well, Will, I'm not going. That's my final decision. I'm training Marty to handle the trial. He's smart. We can talk every night online and share updates." Will said, "I worry that you'll always blame me for this. That's not good for our relationship." Mel replied, "I love you. Only you. That should be enough." "Hope so." That night, they turned their attention to each other. The kids had earplugs, but they didn't use them. As the trial date got closer, Mel spent more time at work. Sherry was getting ready to graduate and had already been accepted to Belham College, which was a 2-hour drive away in Pennsylvania. She and Will were busy with her preparations. Will often felt emotional during this time, but he was trying to stay strong. On the first day of June, just 10 days before the trial was set to begin, Marty Blaine was hospitalized in Pittsburgh because of a heart issue. The doctors said it was due to high stress, and they told him he could no longer take part in the trial. Mel's law firm asked the judge to postpone the trial, but that request was denied. The judge noted that ABC, the law firm, had many lawyers available and was aware that Mel was a senior lawyer who had been preparing for the case. After leaving the courthouse, the team informed Abe about the situation. At that moment, he was in his office with Mel. He shared the news and said, "There's no way around it now. As much as I feel for Marty, I believe having you handle it is better for us. I've secured a room for you at the Westin near the court." Mel nodded, realizing she had little choice. If she resigned, she could face repercussions from the Bar Association. She went home to pack and to comfort Will. She did her best to reassure him. Will helped load her car and check the tires and oil. Then he waved goodbye as she drove off to Pittsburgh. As he returned inside, he worried about the state of their relationship. He made some plans just in case. He felt it might be a relief if things went wrong. Since they had talked about making changes in their marriage, they had drifted apart. Their connection had felt strong before, as they shared thoughts about work, their children, and vacations. Now, he missed that closeness and wasn't sure if it could ever be restored. Later that day, he explained the trial situation to Mark and Sherry. Sherry's graduation was scheduled for Friday. The judge in Pittsburgh typically held trials 4 days a week and reserved Fridays for other matters. Will doubted Mel would return in time for the ceremony. Each evening, Mel called home to talk with Will and the kids. These calls usually happened around 8 o'clock. She had a lot to catch up on. Jury selection was set for the following Monday. During the weekend, Mel called in the mornings. Most of her time was spent with the jury consultants. On Sunday around 8, Will asked her how things were going with her colleague Robert. "No problems, Will. We're both just very busy." "Is he part of the preparations?" "Yes, he's involved, but..." Will didn't think the comment was funny, and Mel regretted saying it. She added, "I'm sorry. Nothing is happening between us. We work in the same area of the hotel, but I sleep upstairs and he goes to his own place. I haven't been invited anywhere." Dinner was brought to her room. On Monday, they picked a jury, and the lawyers made their opening statements. Mel stayed quiet during this part. Jill Blanton spoke for the team and had prepared charts and displays. On Tuesday, the plaintiffs started their case. They brought in 2 experts, and the first expert took all day. Mel carefully asked questions, step by step, and made several strong points. She felt pleased as the day ended. Afterward, she returned to the shared area to prepare for the next expert, who would be the last one. When Mel reached the suite, Robert was already there, filled with excitement about the day in court. As Mel put down her case files, Robert pulled her into a big hug and spun her around. "Whoa, easy there, don't celebrate too soon," Mel warned. "You were amazing, Mel. Just fantastic," Robert replied. "Thanks. I need to grab a bite to eat and do a little preparation, then try to get a good night's sleep," Mel said. Robert didn't push her, but he added, "When we win this case, I'll take you to my place and make you really happy." Mel shook her head and started reviewing her notes. She had a meal and then went to her room to sleep. Wednesday was even better than Tuesday. Mel systematically challenged the plaintiff's arguments using their own expert. The expert put up a fight, but it didn't work in the end. After that, 2 quick witnesses testified. The plaintiff rested their case, and the judge turned down the defendant's motion for judgment. When Mel returned to the suite, Robert was there again, just the 2 of them. Her expert witnesses were scheduled to arrive at 7 for a final review. Robert approached Mel, and this time his hug was gentle and caring. He leaned in to kiss Mel, and she kissed him back. As things began to get more intense, the door swung open and Jill Blanton entered, interrupting their moment. Dinner from room service also arrived. Robert stepped away, and Mel had a quick prep session for both witnesses. Later, she went to her room for the night. The next morning, when the team arrived at court, Herman Billings, the main lawyer for the plaintiff, requested a meeting. Robert, Jill, and Mel went into a room with him and the CEO of his company, Morgan Thompson. Thompson wanted to settle. Billings had a proposal. Jill had been preparing a counteroffer for a week. They went back and forth, but Robert was in a strong position. By 11, they reached a favorable agreement for Robert. They wrote it up and went to court. The agreement was filed, and the jury was dismissed for the day. That afternoon, they sorted out some details, and everyone was free to leave. Mel felt worn out. She returned to her hotel room and rested for an hour. Afterward, she got ready, showered, and learned that Robert was taking everyone out to dinner at a nearby club. He had arranged limousines for them all. Mel called Will to share the news. She promised she'd leave Pittsburgh on Friday afternoon, but would miss the morning graduation ceremony. Will wasn't thrilled about the evening plans or the situation in general. He said, "Mel, this might be the time when you're most at risk." "I know, Will, I can handle it," she replied. "All right." Congrats on the promotion, just don't enjoy yourself too much. Oh, don't worry. The event was held at a dinner and dance venue. Their group of 6 included Robert, Mel, Jill, Jonathan Crisp, and 2 other lawyers from ABC, Ellie Mason, and Mick Delia. They arrived by limo, and Robert was already waiting for them at the table. The meal was excellent, as was the wine. At 9, the dancing began. Robert asked Mel to dance right away. She had enjoyed some wine during dinner and agreed, even though she knew dancing had sparked some of her earlier marital issues. Jill and Jonathan danced together, as did Ellie and Mick. The couples occasionally swapped partners, but Robert and Mel danced together for 6 songs in a row, some fast, 3 slow. The final slow dance left Mel feeling uneasy. She felt the closeness with Robert was overwhelming. At one point, she caught herself thinking about how far they were from home and how impossible it would be for Will to know what was happening. Robert leaned in and whispered, "Let's go to my place. Now or never. You won't regret it." Mel hesitated, but then she said quietly, "Just this once, Robert. No one can find out." She seemed to forget about the others from her firm who could easily guess what was going on. Allowing herself to be led out of the venue, Mel followed Robert to his condo, which was just across the street. Once inside, Robert pressed her against the wall and kissed her. Mel briefly lost herself in the moment, but quickly realized the situation was spiraling out of control. Robert led her to the bedroom where the bed was already prepared. Mel felt trapped in a situation that she didn't intend to let go further. But Robert was persistent, and before she knew it, the boundary she'd held onto was slipping away. She had a moment of hesitation, but then let Robert continue. The night continued with tension and emotional confusion, a series of decisions that Mel would later regret deeply. What started as a night of celebration had turned into something far more complicated, leaving Mel conflicted about her choices. She was feeling a wave of joy that was unlike anything she had ever felt before. The warmth of his affection made her feel alive and helped her forget everything else. Robert was equally amazed by the deep connection they shared. The experience was so intense that it brought her a sense of bliss that made her feel lightheaded for a moment. When she came back to reality, she felt thankful to Robert for sharing this time with her. She loved him for giving her such a beautiful gift, and she wanted to keep feeling that way. When he moved away, she playfully touched him, feeling grateful and captivated by his strength and charm. Before long, he was filled with passion again, and she continued to explore their connection, enjoying each moment. She felt alive, lost in the rhythm of their time together. In that moment, Mel had Robert completely mesmerized. She enjoyed the ebb and flow of their closeness, losing track of time and how often they embraced each other's warmth. After some time, they held each other closely, wrapped up in their emotions. "I've never experienced anything like that, Mel. Never," Robert said. She smiled, feeling the same way. "Me neither. Maybe no one has." They took a little break before connecting again. Robert held her close while sharing tender moments. He was gentle and attentive, easily making the experience special. It brought smiles and laughter, creating a bond that felt important to both of them. After they cleaned up, they enjoyed a light snack together, sharing shrimp and apple slices. The moment felt casual and comfortable. Then they returned to bed, facing each other while holding on tightly. They shared soft laughs, and Mel felt a sense of awe at how beautiful this connection felt. Their moments together were serene, bringing gentle feelings of joy until she drifted off to sleep. The next morning they were still close, but Robert had shifted away slightly. She got up and found his bathroom, where she brushed her teeth and took a refreshing shower. As she came out, she was pleasantly surprised by the smell of breakfast cooking. Her feelings of guilt about the previous night quickly faded when she saw Robert preparing a plate of delicious sausage and eggs. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness about what to do next. With a playful spirit, she grabbed a sausage and took a bite before playfully sharing a sweet moment with him. "Thanks for the wonderful night. It was truly special," Robert said with a smile. Mel replied, "I should feel guilty about our fun, but I don't." They both laughed, embracing the joy they had shared and the connection they continued to develop. The situation was quite dramatic. The breakfast was also very good. He took a shower while she got dressed. When he stepped out, She glanced at him one last time before leaving. After that, she went to her hotel, checked out, and started driving back to Virginia. She noticed she was feeling sore all over, especially in a certain area. She realized that if she were to see Robert again often, she would eventually get used to it. That thought stopped her. There wouldn't be anything regular between them, not if she wanted to save her marriage. If she couldn't do that, then maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But she loved Will and hoped he would never find out about that night. She decided to talk to her friends and ask them to keep quiet. Will was worried about the dinner on Thursday. He could sense how difficult things could become for him and the family. He called Mel's phone at 11, but it went to voicemail, so he didn't leave a message. At midnight, he called the hotel to reach her room, but there was no response. He tried again at 1:30, pretending it was an emergency, but still no answer. He finally gave up and tried to get some sleep. The graduation ceremony went well. Sherry made a speech, even though she wasn't valedictorian. Will and Mark were impressed. Afterwards, Will took them out for lunch. Then Sherry went off to some parties and Mark headed to a friend's house for the night. Will stayed home to organize things. He had a workout room in the basement. It had a heavy bag, an exercise machine, and a weight bench. There was also a small bathroom with a shower, a mini fridge, and a sink. A little TV completed the setup. He went to Walmart and bought a microwave and a hot plate. He was still setting everything up when he heard a car in the driveway. He stepped out from the basement to the backyard and walked up the stairs to the kitchen. Mel was just coming through the front door. He heard her call out, "Honey, I'm home!" It showed him how nervous she was feeling. He turned to face her as she walked into the room. He was leaning against the sink. She entered with a smile that quickly faded when she saw his expression. She sat down in a kitchen chair, staring at him. "Wow," she said, her voice flat. "I called your hotel room," he said. "The last time was at 2:30. Mel's hope of saving her marriage vanished at that moment. It was just a fling. No love connected to it, she said, tears starting to form. He paused before replying. "That doesn't really matter. Maybe those memories will bring you comfort. Or perhaps he will, but it won't be me ever again." "I love you, Will. I always will," she said as she stood up and went upstairs, grabbing her suitcase as she went. Will went back downstairs to finish setting up for his time there. He never came back up that day, and she didn't come down. He focused on finishing a chapter in a new romance novel. Then he thought about what his next book could be. He always earned good money from his books, some of which he wrote under different names. He decided to write about his marriage and how it ended. It would be a serious book and might take a while to finish. He created an outline and turned off the computer. Next, he called his parents to tell them he was getting a divorce. He felt it was best for her to manage her own family. Both kids were away. Sherry was at her best friend's house after all the recent events, but they would both be back the next day, Saturday. Will had already found a lawyer for the divorce in case he needed one. Her name was Zelda Morrison, and she came highly recommended. He called her office at 10 to 5, and she picked up. "Hi, this is Will Baker. I need to set up an appointment," he said. "Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. I have an opening on Monday at 9 a.m., she replied. "Great. Can I share some details now?" "Of course. Do you want to act quickly?" she asked. "Yes, I want her served at her workplace as soon as possible." "Okay, I'll start a file and note everything down." That's what she did. At the end of the call, she said, "I can handle this quickly. We can use adultery or a no-fault separation agreement." "Let's go with adultery for now. I don't think she will deny it," he replied. The plan had Will staying in the house and having custody of Mark. Sherry was old enough to look after herself, so no custody was needed for her. Once Mark graduated, they would either sell the house or one would buy the other out. When the kids came back home Saturday at lunchtime, Mel welcomed them, and then Will came up from the basement. They could all sense that something wasn't right. All four sat at the kitchen table, where they had shared many family meals. Will said, "Your mother and I have, well, we've ended our marriage. We both still love you, but some things have happened." Mel was taken aback. She hadn't spoken to Will about this yet. Though she knew their marriage had serious issues, his sudden announcement was shocking. Both kids turned their attention to her. Sherry asked, "What did you do, Mom?" "Because from what we've heard," Mel said, "I made a mistake with someone in Pittsburgh one night, Thursday." Mark looked at his dad and asked, "Are you divorcing Mom?" Will said, "Yes. Sherry questioned. Just for one night? It's more complicated than that. That one night has been a weight on us. Your mother knew what she was doing, Will explained. Mel said, It's not simple. Will answered, Actually it is. For now I'll be sleeping in the basement. I'll still work in my office. Maybe I'll even cook. I'm not sure how that will all go. There are things we need to decide. I'm truly sorry it has come to this, but it has happened. There's no turning back. Mel left the table in tears. Both kids turned to Will. He said, She thought it was really important to be with this guy, even if it hurt the family. She tried to resist, but she didn't succeed. It changed everything for us after she met him. Sherry asked, What will she do? Will she stay here? We need to figure that out. Sherry, I'm really sorry this is happening on your special weekend. I'm proud of you and of you too, Mark. They all shared a group hug. Mel didn't come downstairs while the kids were awake. When Mel ran upstairs, she fell onto her bed and cried for a long time. How could she have been so foolish and selfish? Thinking about being with Robert made her stomach turn. The thought made her feel unwell. Eventually, she caught the smell of dinner. It seemed like burgers. She was hungry but didn't want to go down. Will wondered while cooking if the smell would bring Mel down. He thought probably not. He and the kids had slaw and cheeseburgers. They also had some cake. They all helped clean up, and then the kids went to their rooms. They even had a talk in Sherry's room, but they couldn't come to any real decisions. At 10, Will was in the TV room waiting for Mel. When she arrived, she sat across from him. He turned off the baseball game and looked at her. I'm sorry this has all happened so fast, but I didn't see the point in waiting. We're done. It's best to face it. She said, Maybe you should wait a bit. It was just one night, Will. After all these years, just one night. Mel, you had many warnings. Why should I think it wouldn't happen again? You wouldn't say anything. What if you got away with it next time? Maybe you already have. No, that's not fair. For the last few months, since that swap, I've felt uneasy and sad because you seemed to want him more. So you acted on that. But it was a mistake. Just a foolish mistake. No, it was your chance for something exciting, and maybe I wouldn't find out. Was it as amazing as you thought? She didn't respond. Her face turned red, and tears started to fall. He said, So, I can never be enough for you. I won't try anymore. She replied, A marriage isn't just about that. It's a big part, and for us that part is gone, so no marriage. I could make you happy. I always did. You made me happy too. But you chose him anyway. Now you can have him, not me. That's your choice. He got up and went to his new sleeping place. Mel sat in the chair and cried some more. Then she stood and went to Sherry's room. She knocked on the door. Sherry opened it and asked, What? Mel said, I love you. I messed up, but I love you. I'm so sorry I missed graduation. Sherry hugged her, but then said, Mom, how could you do this to all of us? I don't understand, Mel said. Me either, replied Mark. Mark stepped out of his room and asked, Where's Dad? He's in the basement. I told Sherry I was sorry, and I'm sorry to you too. I love you both. Don't forget that. The times ahead will be hard, Mel said, giving them both a hug before heading to her room, feeling sad. Mark turned to Sherry and said, At least we can get some rest. He went back to his room. When Will met with the lawyer, she had the documents ready for him to sign. After signing, they talked about what might happen next. She warned him that things could take a long time if Mel decided to contest it. Mel was a skilled lawyer at a top firm. Will shrugged, unbothered. Zelda remarked, I think this is all moving too quickly. What happened is shocking. People often react without thinking. Will replied, I saw this coming for months. I told her what would happen if she continued like this. Now it's happening. I don't see a reason to wait. The marriage is done. All right, I can file it now and serve the papers this afternoon. Please sign here, she said. At 2 o'clock, Mel was in her office and accepted congratulations from her colleagues without much reaction. When Abe called her in before lunch, he asked, What's going on, Mel? I was too weak around him. I mentioned that before. He reached out to me and I went for it. Now I might end up all alone, Mel said quietly. Abe said, I doubt it. You'll find someone else. Just look at you. Not him, Abe. Not Will. Give him time. He might come around. She nodded but felt uncertain. At 2 o'clock, her secretary brought in a young man who served her the papers. Mel felt empty inside. After some time, she called Maury Slotkin, the family law expert, to meet her at Abe's office. She handed them each copies of the documents. Abe said, "Wow, that was fast." Mel replied, "He already knew what was coming." Maury reviewed the papers and said, "If what it says is true, this seems fair. I know Will has been the main caregiver. Yes, he works from home too. You have 20 days to respond. Do you want to fight this? Even if you do, he can still get the divorce." "I need some time to think about it," Mel said, feeling overwhelmed. Mel went home early. Will was in his study, focused on his work. She peeked in and said, "I'm home. I have the papers." "Okay," he said without looking up. Mel realized he was purposely avoiding her, though he pretended to be calm. She went back to the kitchen, reflecting on their time together and how well they understood each other. She noticed he was tense, a sign she had recognized for years. The thought of losing that connection felt heavy in her heart. She decided to take her time and hoped that maybe he'd start to miss her. It was the only plan she could think of. After Mel arrived home, Will struggled to concentrate on his work. He was upset and didn't feel like writing. Whenever he thought about his situation, he imagined Mel with Robert, and it bothered him deeply. He knew he needed to take action, so he looked into his options. Will went to the kitchen to cook dinner. He was making a chicken dish with onion and rice. It had a spicy flavor he enjoyed, and the smell filled the air. Mel entered and sat at the kitchen table. She watched quietly as Will cooked. After a while, he turned to her and said, "It's tough to concentrate with you here. I'm sorry. I really want things to feel normal again with everything that's happening. The kids, and Sherry's leaving. I don't think we'll be divorced by then. We could be. We could sign the papers. It wouldn't take long for you to find a new place." "I already have a place. The same one I've always had. I like it." There was a long silence while Will chopped garlic. Then she spoke up. "I'll only say this once. I made a huge mistake. A weak moment. I ruined everything. If I could change it, I would." Will replied, "I won't accept being pushed aside, Mel. That's what you did." "Will, we've been together forever. We know each other so well. I hate thinking that might be gone. I hate myself for causing this pain." As she sobbed, Will felt like he was being stabbed in the heart. He sank down to the floor, leaned back against the stove, and cried. But he didn't reach for his wife. The hurt came from her actions. Mel saw how much pain she had caused Will. She walked around the table, knelt beside him, and hugged him tightly, still crying. That's how Sherry found them when she came in through the patio door. Will noticed her first, followed by Mel. They stood up quickly as Sherry started to cry. They rushed to her and formed a tight embrace, moving together as one. After a moment, Will said, "The onion is burning." He hurried to the stove. Mel and Sherry took their seats at the table just as Mark came in through the front door. He looked confused but joined them. They watched Will chop the chicken and add it to the pan, and the delicious smell spread through the kitchen. Mel remarked, "Besides everything else, you're the best cook in the world." The kids giggled a little. Will nodded in response. "Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. The meal was enjoyed by everyone, just like always. No one mentioned the difficult situation. After dinner, they all went to their rooms while Will cleaned up. Life went on like this for several weeks. Mel's lawyer responded to the complaint and suggested counseling. They didn't argue the facts. Mark attended 2 weeks of soccer camp. Sherry worked as a counselor at a nature camp in West Virginia, which left Mel and Will alone at home. Will still made meals, and they both had jobs, but they did not spend much time together. There was no closeness or touching. They were both struggling. When the case came for a hearing, counseling was suggested, and by then Mel felt very upset by Will's distance. He prepared breakfast and retreated to his own room. When the kids were away, he only made cereal for himself. It was surprising to them that neither felt any real desire for intimacy with anyone else. Will had little contact with women, and none caught his interest. Mel sometimes thought about trying to win Will back, but she knew better. Trying too hard would only make things worse. Over the weeks, as Will seemed to pull away even more, she slowly lost hope for their marriage. They went to their first counseling session with Dr. Mary Stevens. She was a straightforward woman in her 50s and had asked them to write down their thoughts before the meeting. Dr. Stevens wasted no time. She said, "You both are struggling with deep sadness. Mel is losing faith that the marriage can be saved and is starting to blame Will. Will feels he can't measure up to what Mel had before. The real question is, what can we do about it?" Will said, "I think we should be apart. Seeing Mel every day is painful for me." Mel was shocked. "We had a good relationship before Robert came along. There's no reason we couldn't have that again." Dr. Stevens asked, "Do you see how Will might not want to be compared to anyone else?" Mel replied, "Intimacy is just intimacy. In our marriage, there have only been a handful of times when he hasn't satisfied me." Will said, "But it wasn't like it was with Robert, right?" Both Dr. Stevens and Will turned their attention to Mel. The night with Robert was special. He was new and exciting, but Will could bring that back. It's been a long time. Will added, "Don't hold on to bitterness. Why haven't you tried to reach out to him?" Mel explained, "I don't want to think about that night because it makes me feel terrible. I actually feel sick just remembering it." Dr. Stevens asked, "Have you seen Robert at all?" "No, he came to our office twice, but I avoid him. I've been warned when he is around, so I ensure I don't run into him." Mary inquired, "Have you felt attracted to anyone else besides Robert?" "Not really. I wanted Will at first, wanted him to show affection. But now I realize he won't, and I don't want anyone else. In fact, I don't even want him anymore." Dr. Stevens then asked Will, "What stopped you from trying to reconnect in that way?" "Because I can't get that image of them together out of my mind. I don't think I could even perform." "We're in trouble." Mary asked, "Have you felt attracted to other women?" "No, not even the neighbor who used to catch my eye. Just nothing." Mel said, "If you could just move on and be with me, it might help. Or you could be with her. She's interested. Take your life back, Will." Mary looked at Will with curiosity. He replied, "I wish." Mary ended the session after that. That weekend, Will went to a rented cabin by the lake in West Virginia. He didn't bring his computer, just a notebook. He had been stuck on his writing for a few days. On Saturday morning, he drove to Pittsburgh. He spent 8 hours there, mostly walking around. He didn't take pictures or write anything down. He just observed. He spent Sunday at the cabin, and then called Mel to say he would stay a few more days to relax. On Monday, he went back to Pittsburgh again. He spent 10 hours there, observing more. He returned home Tuesday afternoon. The trip had helped a little with his writer's block. He had some new ideas for his next thriller. Will and Mel attended their second counseling session. Will arrived in a better mood, which he credited to his trip to the cabin. Mary had offered him medicine for feeling low before, but he just enjoyed his break. At the end of the session, Mel felt slightly encouraged by Will's improved mood, but she noticed some tension that made her uneasy. There had been some signs of stress at home and during the session. Will left on Friday for the cabin again. By then, Mark was home to be with Mel. Will returned to Pittsburgh on Saturday and Monday. He came home on Tuesday. On Wednesday of that week, Mark went to a nature camp where Sherry worked as a counselor. Will was in his study when someone knocked at the door. It was his neighbor, Linda Miller. She had lived next door for 6 years, was divorced, and was 30 years old. She was attractive and had a 7-year-old daughter named Velma who was with her father for summer vacation. Will was surprised to see Linda. "Hi, Will. I wondered if you could help me with my sink drain. I have a wrench." Linda was quite different from Mel. She was blonde with fair skin, very pretty, and younger. She had wanted to be with Will for a long time because he reminded her of her first boyfriend, and she appreciated smart men. She had noticed Will in and out of his house, especially through the basement door. Will, dressed in his usual gym shorts and t-shirt, put on some sneakers and went with Linda to her place around the corner. She wore gym shorts and a t-shirt too, along with flip-flops. Will easily cleared the drain in her kitchen sink using her wrench and tape. "I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that." He had always felt a special connection between Linda and himself. However, her obvious flirty behavior alongside his issues with Mel felt a bit strange. He decided to push those thoughts aside and focused on writing until it was time to make dinner. He prepared pork chops and a salad for 2. When Mel entered, he started the grill and asked, "Dinner in 20. Would you like something to drink?" Mel replied, "Sure. Maybe some red wine. You choose." He poured her a glass of blended California wine. They ate outside on the patio. He asked her about her work, and she explained a new project she had. It wasn't related to Robert, and she made that clear without saying it too directly. He shared, "I'm working on a new thriller. I came up with the ideas while at the cabin. You know, it's a nice break from my problems. Our problems. Tell me about them." He briefly shared the idea of an assassin who blended into everyday life. He didn't go into details about how it all worked. After dinner, Mel helped him clean up. They finished the wine and went to bed in separate rooms. That evening strengthened Will's feelings about Linda. Mel didn't ask about his change in mood, nor did she mention the divorce. A couple of times she glanced over at Linda's house, but she wasn't outside. In fact, Linda was out on a date with a man she saw as a potential partner. He was well off, though a bit shorter and heavier. His name was Horace, and he was a nice guy. Linda's divorce stemmed from her past choices. She followed a routine when going out with someone new, ensuring she felt fresh and ready. She enjoyed her time with Will and looked forward to helping Mel as well, if given the chance again. In the following days, Linda and Will spent every morning together, enjoying each other's company for around 3 hours. Linda found it exciting, while Will felt a bit drained. When he arrived for his third counseling session, Mel was already seated. Will sat down and both Mary and Mel looked at him in silence. Finally, he said, "I know you arranged this, Mel. Thank you." He meant it sincerely. Mary asked, "What do you mean?" Will wanted to be honest, so he replied, "You know what I'm talking about, Mary. Let's be real." Mel said, "We thought it would help you. It did, right?" Will answered, "Definitely. It was helpful. I won't forget it." He was looking right at Mel. He noticed anger flash across her face, and he smiled slightly. Mary said, "Be kind, Will. Remember, Mel made a sacrifice." He nodded. "I get that, but there's a big difference here." Mel interjected, "You spent time with her every day this week." "The difference is I didn't want you seeing someone else, and you arranged this for me because of it," he said. Mel looked upset. "Did you enjoy her more than me?" Will wisely chose not to say anything in response. He shrugged. Mary said, "Will, this shows how much Mel wants to move on from the past." Will nodded and replied, "Yes, I see that. Maybe it will work after a few more weeks." He chuckled softly. Mel said, "I'll call her off." Will smiled and said, "You can't do that. I can handle it." Mel sank into her chair but quickly sat up. "Okay, she gets daytime and I get night. I need this. If you're with her, that's fine, but you have to be with me too, okay?" Will said, "You're lovely and charming. You can have anyone." Mel replied, "I can, but I want you. I love you. You are the only one I want." She stood up suddenly, leaned over Will, and kissed him deeply. He let her. She began to touch him affectionately, and he was very excited. Mary did not stop them. She watched closely, curious to see how far Mel would go. Mel seemed to lose control. She knelt down and moved closer to Will. Mary's interest grew even more as she observed. Mel showed great passion, moving forward with determination. There was a couch across the room. She gently pulled him towards the couch, guiding him down. Mary felt unsure about how to react, but didn't intervene. Mel felt very happy, and Will expressed his feelings too. Then both Mel and Will suddenly realized where they were. Mel moved away from Will and the couch. He quickly sat up and looked at Mary, who was looking back at him. He turned away, walking to a small bathroom nearby and using some paper towels. When he opened the door, he zipped up and returned to his chair. Mel was already back in hers. Silence filled the room for a moment. Mel, the lawyer, said, "Sorry if we made things awkward, Mary." Mary looked at Will and said, "That must have been intense for you. We might need to talk more about this in a private session soon." Will stared at her in surprise, and Mel stood up quickly. Mary began to laugh, and soon the other two joined in. Once they settled down, Mary said, "I'd like to plan a session for all of us in about 2 weeks to see how things are going." Mel and Will arrived back at the house in their separate vehicles. It was Thursday afternoon. Will planned to go to the lake cabin for the weekend and didn't want to change those plans. He believed it was important to take a break. He would be gone until Monday afternoon and would make a few more trips to Pittsburgh. After the counseling mix-up during the weekend at the lake, Mel and Linda talked about Will at Linda's house. Mel said, "I think your part can end now." Linda smiled and replied, "My boyfriend Horace is short and round, but he's kind and has money. Will isn't short or round, and he has real talent, as you know. Why should I leave if I've been invited?" "Because I want to work on our marriage. I want to see if we can make it better. And having you here makes things complicated. I wasn't a problem when you invited me." "True, but it really helped you too. Remember, he's my husband, not yours." "Maybe I could win him over." Mel's voice became serious. "You really don't want to go there." Linda replied, "Okay, how about we share him for a bit? I won't try to keep him, but I'd like some time too." Mel wasn't convinced. "You can find someone else for a night." "So can you. I'll keep Will occupied if you want." Mel paused, then said, "I just want my family back." Linda sighed. "All right, I want him Monday night. All night. Then I'll back off. After dinner I'll knock on his door. You can go over on Tuesday." Mel agreed. As they parted, she warned, "Be careful." Linda said, "I have another option if needed, but I'll be fine." Will was home on Monday afternoon. He had made good progress writing on Sundays at the cabin. That weekend, he even made an offer on the place. He ordered pizza that night. Mel seemed distant, so he decided to head downstairs for a while. Later, there was a gentle knock on his basement door. It was Linda. "Last time for us? Let's enjoy it." She wore a simple dress. They had a lot of fun. They laughed and talked loudly so Mel could hear. Will thought that was only fair. After that night, Linda moved on. Her daughter was returning home, and she needed to focus on her family. On Tuesday, Will made a nice pasta dish and a salad for two. He sensed Mel wanted more than just dinner. He chose to go along with it for now. They were trying to keep things as balanced as they could while still being married. That evening, he invited Mel downstairs. They spent the night together. She woke him up early, feeling hungry, and he made breakfast. As they ate, Mel asked, "Are we okay? We can't really go back to how things were. You did me a favor, and I appreciated that. Still, it was a struggle." He smiled at her. Mel replied, "Linda went further than I wanted. She's not a bad person." "Oh, you really don't see it. I thought you understood people better." Will sighed, feeling uneasy as he considered Mel's opinion of Linda. He had always felt drawn to Linda, even if he knew it wasn't right for him. "I need to get to work. I'm going to the cabin this Thursday. I have another project there, and I need the space. I made an offer on it." "I'll take you there if I get it," Will said. Mel replied, "I didn't really ask much about it." "I'll know if I can buy it soon," he told her. That weekend, Will was busy and productive. His ideas for the new story were coming together. He also finalized the purchase of the cabin. He returned home Monday morning around 11. He headed straight to his study. There, he was working on a project that mixed different styles. It started as a romance, but took a turn when the main character made some poor choices one night. He was facing his own issues and wasn't sure if the story would be popular. Will and Mel shared their bed every night that week, though for Mel, sleep wasn't her main priority. She felt she needed to reconnect with Will and thought she was doing well. On Thursday, when Mel got home from work, she said, "Will, I have some news. Robert seems to have vanished. He had dinner at a restaurant he likes on Sunday. After a few drinks, he didn't return to his condo. That's what Abe told me. The police are searching for him now." Will took a moment to think before saying, "He'll show up. Maybe he's with someone new or got caught up in something unexpected." Mel looked at him carefully. "Will?" he quickly added. "Not you. I didn't mean you, but..." After a year of ups and downs, Will and Mel's relationship felt stable again. It was hard at first, but they both worked hard with some help from Mary. They spent many weekends at the cabin. The bed there was used so much that it needed to be replaced. They relied on each other for comfort. After a year of uncertainty, they seemed fine. Will was always attentive, and Mel noticed. Unfortunately, Robert was still missing after a year. With each passing day, people worried more, thinking something bad happened to him. His finances were in order, so it didn't seem like he wanted to leave. However, he had been involved in some risky deals, one of which didn't go well and led to lost money. The authorities were looking into that situation. They also spoke to Gloria's husband, but no arrests were made. No one ever asked Will anything about Robert's disappearance. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.